I felt it energetically. I felt a shift in myself. When I would say, I am infinite abundance, I sort of felt this like unity between myself and this rich flow of life force energy. These were laws that were introduced by the elites who wanted to control people's labour, and they forced people to labour under very, very unpleasant, difficult conditions. It was a removal of people's freedoms. Paradigm shifted back then when the land was taken away and this different kind of exchange of labour for money was introduced. And these vagabond laws essentially punished people who chose to resist the labour conditions and work. The punishments were really brutal, very violent, and a lot of people in this country were killed under this law. We grow up with expectations about achieving good grades or like performing well in school or whatever it is that we sort of come to associate with our own personal self-worth. And these structures and systems that are around us that reward productivity, they reward a certain kind of achievement, I think sort of shape our relationship to culture and relationship to ourselves, relationship to nature, relationship to what we think equates to being a valuable contributor to society. Fundamentally, I need to prove my worth through my activity, through my productivity, when in fact we're all expressions of source and the divine and consciousness that are inherently worthy just because we're here, just because we're breathing, just because we're alive.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's cinematic. Before we dive into the podcast, I just want to take the time to ask you to please like and subscribe to this channel. This will help us grow the podcast, invite more guests on, and share their wisdom as we grow Illuminating Dialogues. I also want to share with you that I'm offering one-to-one coaching. This is a space where we navigate together to clarify your vision, align yourself to your values, and achieve transformation. If you feel called for that, you can book a session with me on my website, jhoty.com. There should be some testimonials as well there. The links are in the description below, and also there's a link for you to join our WhatsApp community as well, where you can discuss these episodes. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the podcast ahead. Hello everybody, and welcome to Illuminating Dialogues number 50, where I really have the pleasure to sit down with Charlotte Webb today. How are you, Charlotte, and where in the world are you coming from?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, I'm in the sunny Cotswolds in Cheltenham. It's a beautiful spring day. I'm feeling very blessed.
So, yeah, I was going to say it's a sunny Scotland as well. Sunny in Scotland as well. We've got that springtime energy. So, for those who are not familiar with Charlotte Webb, I actually came across you, Charlotte, from your videos, especially on Ancestral wealth blocks, and I really, really resonated with that. But those who are not familiar, I'd love to give you a short introduction to you as well. Charlotte Webb is a coach and healer, helping people shed the past, love the present, and manifest a better future, harnessing the power of their mind, energy, and flow with universal life force. So as I read that, kind of eliminates that feeling inside me to have a better future as well. And this podcast is called Illuminating Dialogues. It's really a flow of meaning to illuminate ourselves as speakers and also the listeners in the process. So with that being said, my first question to you, Charlotte, is what lights you up?
Oh, I love this. Yeah, so I think there are lots of things that light me up, but what comes to mind is actually this. I get very lit up by being in kind of conversation and communion and connection with people who are like-minded souls. I absolutely love to be inspired through conversation. And yeah, that's something that's always really been a sort of source of energy for me. I love to be in that kind of creative flow and allow, expressions of consciousness to arise, whether that's through, I don't know, like it could be a beautiful conversation, or it could be a piece of artwork, or it could be a meal, or it could be a piece of music, whatever it is. I've always enjoyed the creative force that's behind all things, and that's what really gets me going. I love to be in that energy.
Fantastic. And I see that from the amazing background you have as well. So many amazing kind of creative shapes of crystals. And the way I love about you, one thing I love about your content is it's very creative, but you have such a way of educating. You're very precise and concise as well. So I'd also love to share some of your wisdom with the viewers. And I love how you balance your creativity with your kind of matter of fact and very clear cut way of sharing your wisdom. So I was wondering if you can start with your journey. So how did you start with kind of entering the workforce? I myself have come from a corporate American culture, very hustle culture, being a very high grade perfectionist at school. Um, and I saw you also were working in London in the hustle culture, and eventually that led to a bit of burnout as well. So, how did you sort of start on that journey, and how did you begin to notice you were getting burned out?
You know, I was really laughing to myself the other day because, you know, when you get asked this question about what's your story, I was thinking, like, where do you even begin? Like, which lifetime do you start with? Because there's so many things that have contributed to where you are in this moment, right? And so it just always makes me laugh when I try to find an origin point. But yeah, I studied art from when I was really young, and I could never have imagined where that would take me, because when I'd finished all my degrees in art, I decided that I wanted to do a doctorate. And I did that because I felt like if I didn't have some structure around me, I wouldn't necessarily make work. And I didn't really want the structure around me to be the art world, because I was feeling like not very aligned with some of the sort of structures and systems and processes in that world. So I decided to do a PhD, and that PhD was actually all about the internet and how we can understand ourselves as authors of something creative when we're using the internet as a medium, like as a material. And through doing that whole process, I actually started to really notice a lot of inequality in the technology sector around me. And I was frustrated by that. And I had conversations about that with some people at the university I worked with. And I ended up starting a collective called Feminist Internet, which was all about trying to bring a more equal process to the creation of technology. And that was really the start of, I would say, my like the meaningful chapter of my career, where I was basically on this incredible journey of traveling around the world and teaching people about feminism, about gender, about technology, and like encouraging young people especially to build technologies with this different, lens. And honestly, it was incredible. And it was very, very exhausting. Lots of traveling, and I was working at the university at the same time. And yes, I was in London, and I was very much in that, that pacey, charged environment where I could feel myself getting more and more burned out, and kind of unable to sort of step back from it, really. And I suppose I started to notice it slowly and surely over time, just with a pattern really of working so hard until the point of collapse, and then recovering, and then repeating it over and again. And I kind of got to a point where I had a health condition that just wouldn't go, and the doctors told me it was not curable, and I would just have to live with it for the rest of my life. And that was the moment where I thought, okay, enough's enough. I can't keep functioning in this way. I now understand that I am not willing to accept that I now have to live with something very uncomfortable for the rest of my life. I can't. So I will not tolerate that idea. But I kind of knew that I was actually creating a lot of additional discomfort and fear, and I was exacerbating what was going on physically because I was not able to process that from a really grounded space. And that was when I really started to go into my spiritual awakening, my meditation more deeply, my yoga practice more deeply, because I just knew I had to go within that at that point in my life in order to, break out of a long-term cycle and go in a different direction.
Amazing. And as you explain that, a lot of people may resonate with that, because right now some viewers, some listeners listening might find themselves in that position where they do feel burnt out, they do feel exacerbated. Could you maybe explore with us, how did you start to unfold that in a grounded way? Because there's one thing intellectually understanding that I'm burned out and perhaps I'm in this system, but then there's another thing being able to take a step back like you did and process that from a grounded way. So yeah, what was your steps to start to do that, first of all?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that really sort of compounded the situation I was in was that it did coincide with COVID. So everything had gone quiet, and the way that I sort of managed it for myself was I almost just kind of melted into the quietness. It's difficult to describe, but I kind of didn't really do much for almost like maybe a year and a half, maybe even a bit longer. I couldn't do much because I was in discomfort all the time. I was finding it very difficult to work because of my health. And so I just sort of was getting through the day, and I was making sure that every day, the first thing I did was I practiced my yoga and I meditated. And I was lucky enough to be able to work from home at that time. So I kind of knew that all I really had to do was practice yoga and meditate, do my job as best as I could, and maybe go for a walk around the park. And I just allowed myself to have the grace of being in a period where I was not as productive. I just decided I need to and want to actually come into a different kind of relationship with quietness and silence. And actually, as an introverted person, it just was this incredible relief to just say, okay, I'm just going to do the bare minimum, and actually that's enough. So a lot of it was a reframing of what I expected of myself. But also, to be honest, I was just kind of forced into a situation where I couldn't do any more anyway.
And I think for me, during COVID times as well, like in 2020, I think for a lot of people, just having that slowdown and reevaluation and reframing sort of shifted our whole relationship to work as well and to ourselves. And you really dive into it in your videos. And I'm wondering, and you kind of touched on it, why is our collective self-worth often linked to this productivity and success, particularly in big cities in the UK, such as London or the greater capitalistic world? It's quite a big topic. But how did you start to take a step back and notice this whole productivity and success paradigm? Because that's quite a paradigm to take a step back from.
Yeah. Well, when I was thinking about this recently, I feel like there's external influences, and then there are internal influences as well, and they're very interconnected with each other. But so, like, in terms of external influences, I think about things like capitalism. I mean, I know that's an incredibly broad sort of framing, but the idea that we are on this planet to produce valuable goods and to sort of exchange our time for money, it's just very deeply embedded in our, highly post-industrialized society. So I think there's a kind of market forces determine part of this, social conditioning. Also, ideas that we should be busy to be worth something. We should be, and it's connected, right? But we often grow up with expectations about, achieving good grades, or like performing well in school, or whatever it is that we sort of come to associate with our own personal self-worth. And these structures and systems that are around us that reward productivity, they reward a certain kind of achievement, they reward a certain amount of production, I think sort of shape our relationship to culture and relationship to ourselves, relationship to nature, relationship to what we think equates to being a valuable contributor to society. And then from the internal point of view, those forces like get kind of crystallized as beliefs within us, or energetic imprints within us, things that we've normalized. We learnt them very, very young. We don't really even see that they're there, but they kind of determine how we show up in the world and how we act and what we expect of ourselves, what we expect of other people, and it shows up in all sorts of ways, whether that's, the perfectionism or the self-sabotage or the self-criticism or the competitiveness, the judgment, all expressions of these feelings of fundamentally, I need to prove my worth through my activity, through my productivity. When in fact, we're all, expressions of source and the divine and consciousness that are inherently worthy just because we're here, just because we're breathing, just because we're alive. So I see that kind of disconnect between what feels like truth to me and then what I've been so conditioned to believe, from all these different places.
Again, it's such a paradigm shift, like from the head to the heart, because we're kind of like disentangling all of these mental constructs of like, okay, this is making me like more worth as a human being almost, since school age, now, at university or then at work. And yeah, it is such a big shift. How can people even start to first notice? They might feel uncomfortable, burned out, perhaps some complaining, some victim mindsets in there as well. But how can people take that next step and start to notice that bigger picture of perhaps, like you were talking about, energetic imprints, or realizing that they could have this pattern within them?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, because it does feel like that awareness, it is the first step, isn't it? And I know for me, years ago when I started to explore meditation, I couldn't believe how powerful it felt to separate the thinker from the thoughts, to start to get a bit of distance from what was going on in the mental chatter. And I started learning to become the beholder or the witness of the thoughts, and start to, in that gap between the thoughts and the thinker, just to have some space actually, and to realize that they aren't always true, and that I don't have to be totally identified with my thoughts. So I feel like a good first step is just to even if it's just for a few moments every day, to sit and perhaps tune into your breathing, perhaps tune into the sensations of your body. Even I find it really helpful to just count to 25 and repeat that over and over again, whilst kind of being aware of the air coming in and out of the nostrils. Just very simple, short meditation practices just start to sharpen that awareness, so that when thoughts do come up, you can start to notice what they're saying, and you can start to have the separation that allows you to question whether they're really true. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that questioning time is so important. As a coach myself, people often come to the space because they don't have that space to question, or even that their other thoughts or emotions are even validated in the space that they're in. Because often we can be stuck in that paradigm of production, or that paradigm of hyperachievement, that we don't even have that space to reflect on that. And I love that, again, that video that I referenced at the start, where you delved deep into that paradigm of ancestral healing, and that's something I'm very passionate about. So where, from your research and from your investigations, where does this kind of paradigm have its roots, at least in the UK? I know you talked about this as well. I think it can help us begin to understand the origins of this paradigm. And yeah, how can we realize the history behind this sort of extractive paradigm as well?
Yeah, it was sort of saying in one of the videos, I think you saw the one about the ancestral wealth blocks one, was one of the stories that really landed it for me the most was about these vagabond laws that were introduced in our country in England. I think it was in the middle of the 16th century, and these were laws that were introduced by the elites who wanted to control people's labor, and they forced people to labor under very, very unpleasant, difficult conditions. And it was a removal of people's freedoms, because people didn't used to have to work in exchange for money. They would just be in a good relationship with the land. They had enough, and the paradigm shifted back then when the land was taken away and this different kind of exchange of labor for money was introduced, right? And these vagabond laws essentially punished people who chose to resist the labor conditions and work. And the punishments were really brutal, very violent, and a lot of people in this country were killed under this law. And when I read about that a couple of years ago, at that time, I was quite deep into my crystal healing training, and I was actually with a group of people that I, like my teacher and some fellow students, and we were talking about abundance, and we were working on abundance for the collective. And I just read this story, and I brought the story into the space, and there was, I think 4 or 5 of us, and we were just sitting around talking about it, and the energy that came up for all of us was really powerful, because we kind of we felt that collective historic pain, really, and the grief that's associated with like a very oppressive history. And then a couple of years later, it sort of re-emerged in my mind when I was exploring this idea of karmic imprints through the compassion key, which I recently discovered and I found really powerful. So it's a story that's been sort of floating around in my consciousness for a couple of years, and it just seems like a symbol of, I know there's hundreds of other stories about our past that all tie into this, but that was the one that stood out to me, that you can sort of sense how you sense in a very deep part of yourself that you're somehow connected to that history. And people talk about our history being carried in our DNA. And, that was the sort of feeling I had deep within myself, that there is something about this that we sense, whether it's a direct lineage thing or not. So it meant a lot to me to kind of contend with that. And I recognized that it's very painful and very sensitive, and something I didn't feel like I had heard spoken about that much in the sort of manifestation and abundance conversation. So it felt like something really important to bring into the mix, really.
Yeah, it was really powerful when I heard you talk about that, because when I clicked on the video the first time, I was just very interested how you were relating ancestral healing to abundance. But then when you mentioned this story, um, I think that was the first time that I linked the paradigm that we're in now to actually a historical context. And I thought, hang on a second, maybe many generations ago, many hundreds of years, although they passed, they can still carry in our, like you said, karmic imprints or genetics or DNA or collective thought patterns, however you want to say it.
Yeah.
But almost like that can carry forward. And as I started to research more, I started to listen to the ancient history of Scotland, and actually that the feudal system came in, and that I think that was also related to do with people connecting to the land by themselves and earning, their share, versus being part of an industrial complex, and how the dynamics change as well from person to person. And that resonated with me on a personal level, actually, because my grandparents came here in the 1950s. And so they had a corner shop. Um, and I think my granddad actually came first. And, the mindset was kind of like work hard, earn your worth, and then, you'll be successful. It's a very like pioneer mindset. And so our family kind of grew up with that. And so I think even this conversation in itself is quite healing for the South Asian collective immigrant or any immigrant communities who perhaps also came to the UK and are also in the paradigm of having, could be termed as scarcity consciousness, or having to work extra hard, disproportionate to their worth. So from my standpoint, your research or your perspective was so healing on multiple angles as well. So I just wanted to also share that. And was there anything around this story that you sort of so you went through the story, and then after the story, did this kind of give you a new paradigm to how you started to go about seeing abundance and seeing money differently in your world?
I think the shift for me was in starting to, I suppose, deepen my understanding of what a block might be, like what kind of what aspects of ourselves might be holding us back. And I suppose it just really allowed me to go beyond the idea of sort of limiting mental patterns and more into that deep energetic space. And I had come across the compassion key, which talks about, these deeper karmic imprints, which sort of sit underneath our thoughts. And so it sort of allows you to see that, let's say you have some kind of imprint around, I don't know, rich people are bad. They don't pay the tax, whatever it is. If that's a very deeply seated imprint somewhere in your consciousness, you can say affirmations that are the opposite of that, but they're more like a sticking plaster, over something that's deeper, and you kind of can't let the light of your soul shine through unless you clear what's at that deeper level. So that was what was really fascinating to me. And it kind of seems to, I love when ideas from different traditions or different modalities come together. And I'd, on my journey, doing lots of different training and courses, I'd come across the like a shamanic perspective on the energy centers in our bodies. And I'd been past some healing rites a couple of years ago by my crystal healing teacher called the Moon Eye Key rites, and they're from an Andean shamanic tradition. And that really opened my mind to this whole other sort of tradition. And in exploring that, I took a course called the Illumination Process with the Four Winds Society. And it's all about our energy centers and how we move through them. But it's coming from this Andean shamanic perspective. And the guy that like leads that is called Alberto Violdo. And I got just totally absorbed in his teachings. And he also speaks about these different layers of sort of perceptual reality. And, so we have our body, and the body speaks the language of, chemistry and cells and molecules. And then we have the mind, and the mind speaks the language of words. And then we have the soul, and the soul speaks the language of imagery and ritual and ceremony. And then we have spirit, and that speaks the language of energy. And so these ideas about all these different layers of our being sort of playing a part in who we are and how we interact and our relationship to Earth. I mean, you asked me at the beginning what lights me up, but that lights me up. These portals into understanding ourselves in a deeper way. So I think it's that's the terrain I think that we get to work in when we're exploring, our relationship to abundance and safety and true wealth and prosperity and things like that.
And yeah, like what you said about when you started, you were saying about that mindset is like rich people are evil, or they could be other patterns as well. And in the meditation that you do, it's like I deserve wealth, or there's sort of affirmations and phrases. And when you were saying them, I noticed that in myself there were limiting beliefs, and on the spiritual path there can be certain limiting beliefs like you don't deserve wealth, or wealth is bad. And I found I didn't even realize I had that. And then I realized when you were saying these affirmations that there's some triggers in the body that happens. So what was your experience around wealth and around money and around abundance, perhaps before you started to look deep into that? And then what really did the affirmations shift for you, both an internal world and then an external world as well?
Yeah, I've been exploring this for a while, and I think it's an ongoing process, to be honest, because I think our relationship with money is sort of a mirror onto so many other different aspects of ourselves, right? It's like starting a business is like starting a degree in shadow work, right? It's like just it does it like talking about illumination. It illuminates so many things that we believe about ourselves, that we believe about the world, that we believe about abundance, whatever. So I don't know, it's been an ongoing process for me, and as I've sort of delved in more and more, I have uncovered a lot of things that I believed to be true about myself in relation to other people. And that could be the role I played as like the cool one that always had the quirky job, not the corporate job. There's so many things about our experience and about our past that sort of weave through our relationship to money, that aren't there, that it's a really deep journey to go on. And I was just listening recently to, there's a book by Jen Sincero, and it's called You're a Badass at Making Money. So I'm reading that, and one of the things that she talks about is writing a letter to money. And I went through that process, and even that, it showed me another layer again of, what have I expected of it so far? What have I projected onto it? What have I, rejected about it? And what kind of new relationship do I want to move into with it? And so it's sort of this kind of playful exploration of your relationship. I think we get to sort of untangle over time and, come into a new kind of harmony. I know it's something that, just for a lot of time was not important to me. I think I did reject it on the basis of some false beliefs, but also just because I just didn't think it was for me, or, part of what was important to me. And I think another common one is sort of that it's not compatible with a spiritually pure existence, or like in my case, because I was such a creative person, I sort of thought, well, it doesn't matter because the most important thing is making meaning. Like, that's the currency that I'm operating in. There's nothing wrong with that. That's absolutely fine. But I am really curious about, moving into a different relationship with it now.
And it's really that discernment. I feel like I'm quite creative as well, and I love to create things, and purpose is so important to me. But I realize that it can't consume everything. There has to be discernment, and there has to be balance. And like, is the purpose just for me? Is it for others? Is it a balance? How am I serving people? And an element of self-worth comes in there as well. So I'm also wondering, you mentioned this term like slaving away in one of your videos, and I find that quite a powerful term, because when we're working, we might realize, or we might think that we're hustling hard, working hard. But when we're using this term slaving away, it puts a different paradigm on it. So how can we begin to notice that perhaps we're not hustling, but we might actually be slaving away, and might not actually be recognizing our inherent self-worth and our output, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I guess it kind of comes back, I think, partly to that thing of that we were talking about before, of sort of pausing to notice, like, what's the nature of your engagement with what you're doing? Do you know what I mean? I was talking to Haley Curtis about this recently. We were talking about hustle culture, and we got into this discussion about one of the sort of litmus tests of how sort of absorbed you are you putting any gaps between the different things that you're doing? Like, are you literally just going from one activity to the next with no pause, with no spaciousness, or filling those gaps with maybe scrolling on your phone, or, checking that extra email? Because sometimes, I don't know if you feel this, but we get this kind of wired momentum where it becomes too difficult to stop, and that we kind of like brace ourselves against reality by just filling every single second with something.
Yeah, now that you've said that, I've noticed that myself, but also others as well. So yeah, say we've got like 20 emails to do, we might do 10, check our phone, 45 minutes have passed. And that's probably to do with a deeper subconscious or emotional process. Like, we're wanting to do tasks, but it's coming from a place of force. Yeah, so how would you describe that process of taking that step back and noticing the limiting beliefs that are coming from that pattern?
Yeah, I think I've started to sort of just notice signs that I'm too wired, I'm too busy, I'm too stressed, right? And that I was saying this to Haley as well. Like, one of the big ones is if I leave the house and I feel like I have to check, did I lock the door? Then I'm like, you got to slow down. Because I know that if I've started to feel like I can't trust myself, did I leave the gas on? Did I lock the door? That kind of lack of self-trust, to me, it shows me that I'm not present. Because the reason I don't know if I didn't shut the door or lock the door is because I wasn't present when I was leaving the house. I was thinking about something else. Maybe I was listening to a podcast. Maybe I was like half checking my phone as I was leaving the house. So I start to notice behavioral patterns that are indicators that I'm a bit too far gone down the road, down the pathway of, okay, like, I've come out of balance. And then when I notice it, I have to kind of take some time to pause and say, okay, are the things that I don't need to be doing right now? Can I ground myself? Can I be in nature? Can I return to the practices that I know help regulate my nervous system? And can I just take stock and like come back to myself? Because I think a lot of the drive to just fill every moment, it's a coping mechanism. That's how I see it, or that's how I feel it. It's like it's too painful to sit still because I don't feel safe. I feel anxious. It's not comfortable to just be with myself. So instead of that, I'll just fill it in because the void is very uncomfortable. So it's sort of like somehow we get to very gently allow ourselves to feel the discomfort of being quiet and not having anything to do, and start to be okay with just that silence, the boredom, the weirdness of not being absorbed every second. And it's not easy, but I think it's helpful if we can.
And it takes a great degree of integrity and grounding. Like you said, even like the keys in the door, the gas, like, and I myself, I would say I'm quite a heady person naturally and creative. So I have to really take time to ground myself and realize, okay, did I handle the door with care, or did I do this? Did I do that? And yeah, I think that's such a underrated point, but so powerful as well, for people as well. If we go back to that, some of the limiting beliefs behind abundance as well. So, what are some of the limiting beliefs you perhaps noticed in yourself and clients as well, as you went deeper in that process? Perhaps some examples of things you've noticed that maybe were quite surprising, but when you did have a shift around that, things kind of opened up in your life, or even emotionally within your body.
Yeah. So one thing I would say I notice a lot, and I've experienced this myself, but also in conversations with clients, is if I succeed, I'm somehow taking away from other people, or it's like it's unfair for me to charge money because it's somehow greedy. Maybe that actually there's sort of like two distinct points, but if I shine, I'm taking away somebody else's opportunity, and that is kind of coming from a view of the world where there's just limited resources, where, actually, if we sense that there's always enough for everyone, there's always enough room for everyone to express their authentic gifts, we are less likely to feel like we're detracting from somebody else by doing well. And of course, that feeling of if I succeed, someone else will not have an opportunity is also connected to, the feelings that we have around other people's judgments of when we step into a new paradigm, like a new role. If we're successful, we might be judged by our friends, we might leave people behind, we might actually be betraying, people that knew us as something else before. And so, I think that one's pretty big. And I've definitely seen a shift when I've kind of uncovered that with somebody, and we've been able to sort of reframe that as, you showing up and shining your light, it can't detract from anybody else, because there is no limit to the amount of goodness and light and service that we all collectively get to put into the world. Then it kind of shifts the energy, and the person starts to feel like, oh, actually, okay, it is okay for me to exchange value with a client who I know I'm going to bring a lot of support and healing to. So yeah, that's one. But you see, like, even from just one, there's lots that it's like one belief, and it has this like constellation or satellite stuff that's sort of connected, and it's entangled, and we get to like unravel this whole little mini galaxy of connections. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
it's like the iceberg analogy where like we were talking about charging for coaching or healing, whatever, and is our worth. And I've been through that myself, going from like £10 to like 50 and then going up, through the years, and then realizing that actually, like you said, there's a lot underneath that. It's shining your light, is exchanging the value. It's the shame, maybe the guilt, the fear of our friends, of our loved ones. And just from trying to charge something, it goes to our value. And from our value, it's then the relationships around us as well. Um, how can we, so if we go just a little bit deeper, how can we begin to unravel some of those beliefs around worth and realizing that shining your light, um, that the universe is abundant, can be our main framing, if you like, and we can carry that in the way that we show up and serve others as well.
I love this. Yeah. I mean, I suppose to go back to our conversation earlier about the different layers and the different kind of perceptual realities, I think one of the things that really shifted stuff for me was just this one meditation. I used to do it all the time. I might bring it back actually. I used to just meditate on I am infinite abundance, and I would I would I would kind of sense that particular phrase in all of my energy centers. But the way that what it unlocked was not a thought. It was not a belief. It was a feeling of attuning to this abundance frequency. And I felt it energetically. I felt a shift in myself at that kind of vibrational level where when I would say, I am infinite abundance, I sort of felt this like unity between myself and this rich flow of life force energy. And it wasn't about, it just wasn't about thoughts. It wasn't about concepts. It was a feeling and a sensation. And that really did help me. And so there's that sort of energetic level. And then there's like just also taking aligned action, right? We can be so excited to tune into this frequency, like manifestation and the feeling of abundance, and that's really powerful. And then from that space we get to act and like go and do things that shift the dial, in our 3D reality. So I think for me it's always like dancing up and down this ladder of our body, our mind, our energy source, and sort of like coming up and down and being where we have to be in the moment to get done what we needed to get done, but doing it from that place where we can connect to something much bigger than ourselves.
I love that. And like you were saying about aligned action, and I think that's such a pivotal point, because when people talk about manifestation, and I'm wondering your thoughts on this, sometimes there could be some elements of, again, lack or scarcity consciousness. So coming from a place of, even if it is subtle materialism, greed. So still trying to manifest something from a place of being not enough, if that makes sense. So I love your approach to the word manifest, because it is used a lot on YouTube, online, in books. So I'm wondering also if you came across that hurdle, or at least how do you hold yourself to that aligned action coming from that authentic place rather than coming from this more attached place.
Yeah. When I heard the phrase about having high engagement and low attachment, it's like,
Yes.
oh, wow, okay. Because I think what I realized, and maybe this is from having an artistic background where we really do learn as artists to focus on process, don't we? It's like, you know that you're going to have to do hundreds of sketches to create this one, maybe like the masterpiece comes out of all this different experimentation, and you focus on process, not just the outcome. And I do think that's helped me, and I realize I learn more and more that that the clarity that we're looking for comes through action. Like, it has to emerge through process. We can't just sit there. I mean, some people will disagree, but like, for me, it's not about sitting there visualizing something and then it literally materializing. It's kind of holding a vision for something, being in that frequency, but then showing up, like going through the process and learning through action. Like, that's such a glorious gift and an experience to act. We have to get up and practice our craft. And there's so much that emerges through doing that. So, if we think about manifestation as like an emergent process rather than this sort of like end point, then it helps us be more like in a relationship to what we're doing without the expectation. Because I don't know about you, but it's like as soon as you let go of the outcome, things just start happening. Like, I'm a yogi. I practice my yoga, regularly, and have done for a good number of years now. And I'm practicing my handstands
Nice.
all the time. Okay, like really, trying in certain postures, but particularly this one because it's very mentally challenging, right? To be, to have to balance on your hands and all of this stuff. And recently I decided to just kind of let go, just give up, like just not keep pushing and trying. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go to the gym instead, like for a bit, and have had this like deep dedication 5 times a week, get up early, practice, hard practice. And I decided to let go. And when I went back, I could just do it.
Wow.
Like, because I had, my expectations had gone down. I wasn't trying. I didn't have that pressure or force. I must be able to achieve this, or the frustration of not being able to achieve it. And then it just kind of came naturally. And I was like, God, I do learn a lot from yoga, but that was a real moment of just let go, prioritize enjoyment and just being in the moment, pleasure, experience it. Does it matter if you don't do the handstand? Like, no. And there it was. And I was like, oh my God, I'm upside down. I'm breathing. This is insane. You know what I mean?
Wow. I think I need to take a leaf out of your book because handstands have been one of my goals for years. I can do a headstand, but not a handstand yet. But yeah, it's like letting go, and seeing what comes. And I think that's coming in co-creation with this universe, not wanting so much of things. And the way you explained it, there's a lot of humility there, like that you're not trying to force anything, but you're in acceptance. As we slowly begin to wrap up, I'd love maybe to explore the topic of healing, perhaps a collective feminine, also masculine, how you experience that, and perhaps put some words to these energies that you might find need a bit of healing or awareness in the collective with regards to the way we work and the way we see ourselves as abundance as well.
I love that. Yeah, I was thinking about this earlier, and I suppose the way that I feel about this integration is I really just feel like honoring both sides of the coin, because, you know, going back to our discussion earlier about, societal conditioning and everything, I think we've experienced a heaviness around this patriarchal society. And it's real, and it's painful. And there's also a version of that masculine energy that's really sacred, that we should, or we shouldn't do anything, but that we can really hold in a very precious balance with the sacred feminine energy. So I think that's where I want to come from first and foremost, is like both are needed, both get to become more harmonious when we can lean into the kind of intuitive flow yin energy in combination with that expansive, like energetic yang force, and like move between the two of them, in an infinity loop, like going up and down the ladder of these different levels of perception. I think that's when we get to, come back into coherence and recognize that we have these dimensions within ourselves, and that's reflected in the macrocosm. The universe has these energies as well, and that it's more to explore when we want to call one in and when we want to call the other in, and what maybe is a bit too high and what's a bit too low, and come back. And it's another way of understanding ourselves and each other. What do you think?
That's really beautiful. Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot, because as I've been coming away from that productivity world, I've been going a lot into the yin energy. So I used to be hyper productive, hyper competitive, you can say, achievement orientated, yang. And as I started to tap into this yin energy of being more empathetic, being more sensitive to myself and others, I've been noticing this yang wanting to come back, but how to integrate it in a more compassionate way, in a more aware way as well, in a more aligned way. And that's not an easy energy to integrate. And that's been my experience as well. So also probably for a lot of men watching might experience that as well, that that we do have both energies inside of us, but that is a challenging energy to integrate, with this co-creation as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I've got this one crystal book that talks about yin and yang energy in terms of the noon, like the high point of the sun being the kind of peak of yang, but the peak of yang is also the beginning of night, of yin. So it's like, it's like cycles between the two. And that really helped me to see, like the end of one thing is the beginning of the other thing. And like the night can't exist without the day. So, you get to this kind of tipping point where it kind of one actually turns into the other. So they're not separate. And that, that helped me really understand it as more like a process than a polarity.
Like a presence that works through you.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. The tradition I come from, an Indian culture, Shiva Shakti, and the Sikh tradition, Miri Piri, which is like a warrior saint kind of combination. And I feel like all cultures have this sort of archetype that points towards. Such an amazing conversation to have with you, Charlotte, and to share with everybody. Where can people find you? What kind of services do you offer? I know you do some work in the Akashic as well, if you can explain that to the audience. And yeah, just where in general people can reach out and get in contact.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. This has been a real pleasure. So I'm very grateful, very honored. And yeah, thank you so much. People can find me on YouTube. I'm Crystalline Charlotte. And yeah, I do offer Akashic Records readings. It's an amazing space. It's a lovely energy. It's totally non-judgmental, and people tend to come for, clarity and direction on, alignment with their soul's purpose, or understanding themselves or their challenges in a different way. And so I love to do that. And I also have applications open for coaching right now. So if you go to my YouTube channel, you can check out the link there. And, if you want to work over a longer period of time, one-to-one with someone, then I'm here.
Wonderful. And I'll put all the links in the description below as well if people want to check that out. Yeah, thank you again, Charlotte. It's such a pleasure to have this dialogue
Thank you
with you.
so much. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very, very much.
Likewise. Thank you.